All right, welcome back, everybody. This is Jon Harris, managing partner with Fortune Management, and I've got several people from our team here in the Mid-South, Fortune Management Mid-South. And so looking forward to a good discussion this evening, talking about some of the things that we run into with our clients in terms of implementing systems and strategies and just overall cultural problems and people problems. So with that said, guys, how you doing this evening?
Great.
Fantastic.
Phenomenal.
Y'all gonna have to be more talkative than that. We're on podcast. People expect us to talk. If they don't get talking, they're gonna go listen.
I've been wrangling kids all day. We're on fall break here. And so the kids we had one of our cousins stay the night for the past 2 nights to give Haley, which is my sister-in-law, a little bit of a break. She's got a 2-year-old and a newborn. And so we've had Adeline for the past couple of nights. And so today, trying to do calls with a herd of elephants running upstairs and slamming doors and fighting over who got tagged in tag and won't be it. That's been my day. Do you guys ever have to have those conversations in the background and mute a client? Like, I'm sorry, I had to yell at some kids real quick. I'm going to put you on a brief hold.
I'm right there with you. My schedule's been absolutely inundated today. It's like I had like 7 or 8 hours worth of calls, but if I had a 30-minute break between 2 calls, I would get 3 or 4 phone calls during a call, and I would spend that 30 minutes calling them back and then schedule 3 more calls. So I'm like, I've got 30 minutes till my next call. Is this something we can knock out in the next 5 minutes? Yes. Okay, great. No. Okay, let's schedule a call. So now my schedule started kind of light, and now the days where I didn't have a lot on them are now full of calls.
Oh, and don't you love it when you're like on back-to-back calls and you get a text message like, do you have a quick sec?
Mm-hmm.
It
turns into 45 minutes.
So funny story. I have to share this with you guys because I had a call with one of my clients this morning. They were at DS World. And she was sitting at lunch at one of the lunch tables. And she said a doctor came over and sat next to her and was like, what do you think about this Fortune thing? And so she was telling him about our relationship and the work that we had done. And then another doctor came over and sat down and she asked the same question, another female doctor. She was like, so what do you think about this Fortune thing? And so my client was telling her, this is, and that doctor, she said that doctor leaned in and said, do they pay you to say this stuff? Like, did they bring you here so that you could talk to people about Fortune?
Right? Simon Sinek calls that, the megaphone effect, when you have people that are singing your praises so much louder than you can. That's awesome.
I remember going to, I don't know how I feel about that, because I went to, it was Displaced Runner World, I think it was 2018. And I think it was 2018. And every time I go up there, if I'm not working the booth, I'm going to meetings, and I'm trying to learn and all this kind of stuff. And I was sitting in an event, and this was back when I was dating Alyssa, because she was there. So it had to have been like 2017 or 16 then. And we attended this event together, and the guy that was presenting was a doctor. I'm not going to mention his name, but he worked with a practice management company. And obviously we're the headliner of DS World, right? Like our logos on everything. We got 30 speakers on the agenda. And I'm sitting in this room, and man, it absolutely felt like he was being paid to push this company. And I was like, how many times are you going to mention this company's name and talk about how badly we need to call this guy and all this kind of stuff? And I'm like, it was to the point where it wasn't like, I'm interested in calling this guy. It was to the point where it was suspect. It was like, you're not just saying that this program has worked for you. You're like, something's up here. It was to that extent. But I wonder how that would work. I wonder if we gave her.
Did you ask him? So, what is your commission if somebody you talk to?
I wonder what that would look like. I mean, in terms of marketing our business, it's very different. But I wonder what that would look like, if that would even be. I don't know how I feel about that. If we were to put an event together, have 5 or 6 of our clients in the room and say, all right, I'm going to give you $1,000 for every doctor in this room that signs up for a PA.
Yeah. The thing is, we really don't have to, which is cool. I mean, that's awesome that we really don't have to. They just,
Mm-hmm.
They just show up and they talk. So it worked
Carrie,
out.
Carrie, how's the valuation coming? You're doing a valuation on a practice down in Monroe, Louisiana.
Yeah. So, it's a funny thing because these clients down there, they want to expand. They're ready to buy a practice. This is a practice that is aging out. Doctor really wants to do it as a very casual transition. They sent me some of the initial numbers and I was like, whoa, we need to talk about this. Like they sent it over really casual, like, hey, Carrie, can you take a quick look at this for us? And I'm like, oh, hold on. We had conversations. I sent them a whole list of stuff, asked for all this and let me look at it. And then I was calling Jon. I'm like, you know what? I'll just do a valuation on this, kind of like a back of the thumbnail sketch, because these are clients that came through Jonathan Miller to do their startup. They transitioned to me. They were with me for like a year and a half, 2 years. They just transitioned out to go on their own for a while. But they call me when big things come up. And if they purchase the practice to me, this would be a great opportunity for them to come back in to the fold. And so anyway, they're always really good about staying in communication, but I'm working on the numbers. There's no way. So when we talk about the multiplier, it's a weird situation, right? So the equipment in the practice is very new, but the doctor has been transitioning out, like down for quite some time. So through COVID and all of that, the practice has really started to depreciate. The skill of the doctor was good, but the number of procedures that he's doing that have real significant value and stuff like that has significantly dropped over the last 2 years. He's got a lot of pressure to sell, but he wants to do it in a very friendly handshake kind of a deal.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to end up having to give these doctors, some real honest feedback around what the value is. And it's probably going to be kind of a deal killer.
Yeah. There's several different, and just for clarification purposes, we're not licensed business evaluators. There are companies that do that. When we say valuation, we're going in and basically doing our version of a cone beam on a dental practice and identifying what the opportunities are, what the growth potential is, right, and what we feel like is an estimated fair market value for the practice. And 99.9% of the time, it's going to be spot on with any transition company that does an evaluation, a formal evaluation through either their company or through an accounting firm that they work with. I know Blue and Company is a really good one that DDS Match uses. That I love their evaluations. They're very in-depth and comprehensive and robust. And the valuations come back very, very, very reasonable. They're not inflated, which is what we see with a lot of valuations. So,
and to be fair, I asked him, encourage the doctor to get a true valuation. He doesn't want to. He's got his accountant telling him what to sell the practice for.
Right.
So it's one of those, situations, and I just don't want them to walk in. And we talk about the ramifications to the practice. Like, what's this going to mean to your culture? What's this going to mean to your communication? What's going to happen with systems? What's the likelihood of people transitioning out of the practice? What's the situation?
Yeah, that's an interesting one too, because for the most part, it's an income approach that you take in dental practice valuations, and where you're looking at the revenue and the cash flow. And you're going to see like a multiple of discretionary earnings or a multiple of EBITDA. Some people look at that and they'll say, well, it's a percentage of sales. And those are typically like BVR is one of the platforms that I use, and it'll break it down into those three categories. It'll show you based on the most recent transactions, and you can filter it and kind of determine, based on the revenue and the profitability, you can break it down and it'll show me 100 practices, and I can look at what the average of those 100 are. Right. And if the average is 75% of previous 12 months revenue or 2.5 times EBITDA or whatever, we can come up with the multiplier for practices that have been sold in that area in the most recent 12 to 24 months. Right. Which is very similar to what a traditional, business valuation approach is going to be. But in a scenario like that, it almost makes more sense to do an asset approach, because like for a startup, for example, an established practice, they have equipment. The equipment may be paid off. It may be depreciated to some extent or fully depreciated, but the revenue's way up here. So it makes more sense to base the value of the business off of what the revenue suggests. Whereas a startup might have $1 million worth of equipment and they're only doing $38,000 a month. So is that business really worth the discretionary earnings that spin off of $38,000 a month? Or is it worth what the assets are worth? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So in a scenario like that, you might almost take an asset-based approach.
Well, if you took an asset-based approach and they still owed money on those assets, then wouldn't the asset be worth its, current market value less?
Book value, yeah. Yeah. So if you've got a $150,000 CEREC machine and you've depreciated, $75,000 of it, then the value of that CEREC machine is $75,000. If you still have a liability on that CEREC machine, then you've got to take that into consideration too.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Well, here's what's interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carrie.
We so rarely talk about that asset-based approach. It's interesting that you bring that up because it's a more the multiplier is what I'm familiar with. That asset-based approach is an interesting scenario that I really hadn't considered because I guess most of the equipment in there is very new, even though the practice is aging. So it's a good insight.
Well, and here's a conversation that I've been having over the past couple of months with an associate that wants to buy in. And Bill Barrett, when he and Casey wrote that book, wrote the book about mergers and acquisitions, and they talked about three different valuation models, right?
The DSO decision.
Right. They talked about three different valuation models, one being a trailing 12 months and a percentage of revenues for the trailing 12. They talked about a 3-year blended average. So what were revenues the last 3 years? Take a blended average and a percentage of that. And then they looked at the EBITDA valuation. So with those, but here's what's interesting. Even though the average dental practice, if you look at the deals that have been done or the acquisitions that have been made over the past several years, the average practice is going for say 60 to 75% of whatever that bottom line dollar is. But then I know, Jon, you've done this. Carrie, I'm sure you've done this. We've worked with offices where their practice was purchased for 90, 95, 100, 105% of what that dollar value was.
You said bottom line value. You're talking about profit or are you talking about top line revenue?
No, I'm talking about whether you do the 12-month trailing collections or the 3-year blended average collections, that number that you come up with, is fair market value 60% of that number? Is it 70% of that number? Is it 80, 90, 100% of that number? Mm-hmm. And what determines the percentage that they're going to rest on in terms of what that practice is worth? Yeah.
There is a point at which it becomes very subjective. And so it's not as simple. I get that question asked. Matter of fact, DB asked me that question not too long ago. He's like, hey, what percentage of practice is selling for? Maybe it wasn't DB. It was somebody it was LB on a call on the virtual event that we did the other night. He said, what percentage of practice is selling for right now? And it's really that it's not a misconception, but I guess that's the easiest way to interpret it. It's like, how much did you get for your practice and what were you collecting? So it's an easy way to interpret values, right? But it's a lot more complex than that because just because you've got two practices that are collecting $1 million could be worth very different numbers.
Right.
Because what you're buying when you buy that practice is cash flow, and you're buying location, and you're buying efficiency, you're buying profitability, you're buying culture.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're buying a lot of things. And so when we do our version of it, it's a lot more in depth. I mean, significantly more in depth than what, a traditional transitions company is going to do. They're going to look at top line revenue. They're going to look at average top line revenue of practices, either nationally, regionally, or in that particular market. And how does this practice compare? If it is performing better, if it's in the top 90%, bottom 10%, whatever, average, okay, they're going to look at profit how profitable is the practice, and then they're going to look at location. Where's the practice located?
Competitive marketplace.
What's that?
They're going to look at the competitive marketplace. Mm-hmm. What's the landscape as far as competition in that market?
Yeah.
But see, what we know as coaches, and this is interesting because this is not public knowledge or even what most people kind of consider, because most people will look at it from a logical standpoint. But what we know is that location really doesn't matter a whole lot when it comes to the potential of that practice, whether you're in, Podunk, Tennessee, Podunk, North Carolina, or a major metro city. The levers to pull to create sustainable and year-over-year growth, they're consistent, but not every practice knows how to pull them.
Yeah.
Right. So when I'm looking at, okay, if I do a 3-year blended average and what percentage of that number is fair market value, I look at all of those things you mentioned, Jon. How efficient are they? What systems do they have in place? Are they consistent? What is the longevity of their team? Do we expect those team members to stay on board? Do they know what they're doing? Are they loyal to the brand or loyal to the doctor? I look at their year-over-year growth. Are they stagnating? Are they declining? Or are they growing quickly? What's their new patient flow? Are they constantly? And what is their patient retention? What is their hygiene pool, right? Hygiene efficiency, hygiene effectiveness. Those particular KPIs, I think, speak volumes as to what the future growth potential is in any practice. And is this doctor going to come in and purchase this practice and see an immediate decline? Or are they going to come in and be set up already without having to do a whole lot of work? Are they going to be set up for a growth trajectory?
Yeah, those are some of the variables that are in the analysis that we do. And oftentimes it results in us butting head with the transitions consultant a little bit because they don't look at those things. They're just looking at, I verbatim, I'll quote the conversation. Yeah, but if doctor comes in and does nothing, then the cash flow is the same, right? True. Doctor comes in and does nothing, cash flow is the same. If you do it exactly the way the existing doctor's doing it, you're dropping 47% of the bottom line. That's true. Okay. However, they're not pre-appointing hygiene. They're balance billing patients. Those are not sustainable systems. So although it's working for the doctor at this particular point in time, if you carry that forward for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years, this practice is very, very different than what it is now. Additionally, fee schedule, perio. For example, if their fee schedule hasn't been touched since 1915, and I just got off the phone with a client of mine who recently bought a practice and they thought their fees were high. I did a fee schedule analysis. Their fees didn't even register on the NDAS. Right. And I was like, okay. Who do we lose? We lost Jocelyn. She'll be back. There she is. And so we've got to up the fees. We've got to increase the fees. Insurance reimbursements haven't been renegotiated, and if ever, probably not a coding perio. I'm confident that the hygienists are treating perio, but they're not billing it, not coding it perio, right? For obvious reasons. That's a significant legal liability. So no, we can't continue to do it that way. Right. And when we come in and start diagnosing perio and raising fees and pre-appointing patients and now asking patients to pay us, we experience attrition. So it's not the same. It's not apples and apples.
It's never going to. Yeah. And that's the thing, because they're not taking in the real power in a practice.
Mm-hmm. Now, the way I look at that as significant opportunity, right? Like, okay, we're going to fix the perio program. We're going to fix the fee schedule and the insurance reimbursements. We're going to fix the pre-appointing and the balance billing. We're going to fix all that stuff. And yes, we're going to experience attrition, but the growth potential from that is significant. So it's kind of like risk and return. If you can effectively mitigate those risks, then the practice grows. And more often than not, it works very well. Like I've got a client that went from 980 to 3.6 in about 3 years. Same scenario. Her second location went from $1 million to $2 million in 12 months. Same scenario. $30,000 to $90,000 in 6 months. Same scenario, right? So very possible. You just got to know what to look for. You can't just. All right, now I'll call you back. It's just not as simple as looking at the 12-page prospectus on the practice and saying, okay, I know what I'm buying, because you don't, if that's the only thing you're looking at. There's a lot more to it than that.
And we did a PA for a doctor about 2 years ago who purchased a practice for 1.4 million. And the 2 years that she owned it saw total decline because she wasn't used to doing the procedures that put those numbers on the board. So she couldn't sustain the 1.4 million. And it went from 1.4 million to about an $850,000 practice in the span of 2 years. And so helping these guys understand what they're purchasing and what their opportunity is huge.
Yeah.
It is.
I had the same thing happen with a client up in Kentucky. He bought the practice. He got referred to me by one of my East Tennessee clients because he bought a practice, his first practice. And it was, he bought it from the doctor, but 60% of the restorative revenue was implant revenue. And he doesn't do implants. And so it didn't occur to him to think about, okay, I don't do these procedures, but these procedures are generating $300,000 a year and I don't do those. So on day one, I've lost $300,000 worth of revenue. That didn't occur to him. And that it happens to a lot of people. And so he bought the practice and it went from like almost 800,000 down to like 400,000, like overnight. He was like, what? This isn't right. Something's wrong. And so that's how I got introduced to him. And now he's fixing to start placing implants. We've bought another practice and merged it in. So now he's doing about $120,000, $130,000. He's collecting about $100,000 a month now. But I mean, I think that's a big one that happens to a lot of people. I think from what I've seen, and you guys tell me if you have different experience, from what I've seen, the biggest things that affect what your experience is going to be post-acquisition are fee schedule, insurance reimbursements, perio, crown to filling ratio, which measures how proactive a doctor is. For example, if you've got a doctor who's, 1-to-1 and you've got another doctor who's 4-to-1, the doctor who's 4-to-1 is 4 times more productive than the doctor who's 1-to-1. Not a right or wrong or good or bad, just different clinical philosophy. So if the doctor whose practice I'm buying is 4-to-1 and I'm 1-to-1, I'm losing revenue on day one. But if the roles are reversed, I'm going to see a significant return on day one. Okay. And then the fifth one, I would say, is mismanaged hygiene schedule. And those last, and all 5 of those are variables that I see consistently. And so to find the right practice, man, if you can find all 5 of those in one place, you're about to, and I'll tell them when I'm vetting a practice for a client and they're wondering whether they should buy it or not, if I see that and all 5 of those variables are present at the beginning, that's a freaking grand slam, man. I mean, you're fixing to knock it out of the park.
So let me run a scenario. Oh, go ahead, Carrie. I'm going to look this up real quick.
I just think there's one other thing that has to be considered, and that's the culture of the practice. If you have high turnover, and if you're walking into a practice that is either bleeding out talent, or conversely, you're walking into a practice where your talent has aged and is inflexible in their thinking or their willingness to accept a new way of doing things. Mm-hmm. All those things can be in great place, but you get another leader that comes in to take over and the culture will not support ongoing growth. Mm-hmm. And so often people will not look at the impact of talent on the short-term revenue stream of buying a new practice. I mean, talent really can make a very big difference in how they manage that talent and how they manage themselves as a business leader in a new organization, whether they're an established business person or not. That is an intangible that is quantifiably risky.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's an interesting question I want to ask you guys. Let me pull this up real quick. Okay. Here was a practice. This is an ad for a practice for sale. Says huge opportunity, excellent modern general dental practice located in a highly desirable area. The practice has over 2,000 active patients with revenues hovering around $1 million. Ample opportunity for growth as implant placement, ortho, and endo are all referred out. The practice is 1,450 square feet, in excellent condition, has 3 equipped treatment rooms, and 1 is used as a private office. The practice utilizes EagleSoft software and is digital both of pan and intraoral. So $1 million practice, 1,450 square feet, 3 equipped treatment rooms with 1 that could be built out, 2,000 active patients, and they refer out implant, ortho, and endo. If you were looking at that as an acquisition, what questions would you ask?
Why are they only doing $1 million with 2,000 active patients?
Was it 3 operatories or
3 ops, $1 million? What's happening with their hygiene program? How are the ops being spread out, and how many days a week are they working?
That's pretty good per operatory. Is that collection or production?
That's collection.
That's pretty good. That's $333,000 per operatory. That's
but how are they doing that?
Yeah. Well, if you take 2,000 active patients, let's say recare effectiveness is 50%, which means only half of them are consistently coming through recare. That's 1,000 patients. That's 2,000 recare visits per year over a 200-day schedule. That's 10 visits per day. Right. So that would mean that they're somewhere between 1 full-time hygienist and maybe a part one. So they probably got 2 of those operatories are doctor. Yeah. 1 of those operatories are hygiene, probably a mismanaged hygiene schedule, which means they can't get new patients in the schedule in time. They're scheduling recare 8, 9, 10 weeks out.
Yeah.
So I hear great growth potentially in that. Plus,
running what is going to be a restriction on space, though. How are you going to put that out at 1,400 square feet?
Well, that's not. 1,450 square feet for 4 operatories. That's not bad. Especially if they got a room that's plumbed that they could equip. But right now, he's that ratio's off because he's counting on 1 room of hygiene to fill 2 rooms of restorative, so he doesn't have enough hygiene to keep those 2 rooms busy.
Yeah.
So he's doing. Oh, this is a great point to bring up too. Most likely, I just got all excited.
Get so excited.
So he's probably doing what most people do, and he sees cancellations and no-shows, so he's kind of on the fence about bringing on the next hygienist and spending the $50,000 to equip that operatory, even though that's what the business needs to grow. Mm-hmm. And so what I like to talk about is you need to lay the train track before the train gets there, rather than trying to lay it a frame at a time in front of the train. That means the train's going to go a lot slower if you're having to lay the track while the train's there, right? So go ahead and make the investment, lay the track so that the train can just keep pushing. Because what happens is, have your doctors ever said something like, it's just slow right now? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, in other words, there's just not a lot of dentistry coming out of hygiene right now. So the doctor schedule's kind of slow. That starts 10 years ago or 5 years ago, like where that all started, because dentistry is pretty seasonal, right? Cyclical because of the 6-month recare system, format. Mm-hmm. But what happened at some point in time, and this is what this practice is running into right now, what happened at some point in time is hygiene got full and you didn't add and so now when I say full, I mean it's 8, 9, 10 weeks, 12 weeks before you can get recare on the schedule. It's 1, 2, 3 weeks before you get a new patient on the schedule. Therefore, new patients aren't coming to you. They're going somewhere else. They're scheduling with you and then calling the next person. Whoever gets me in first wins. So when your hygiene and the first indication that this is starting to happen is they start to split the hygiene appointment. So when they can't get the new patient in time, then what they start doing is putting the comprehensive on the doctor's schedule and the prophy on the hygiene schedule, and they turn it into 2 visits because they don't have the block set aside to accommodate the new patient. So that's sign number 1 that they're starting to run out of hygiene capacity. Well, as you run out of hygiene capacity, your new patient volume starts to decline. It's true that 60 to 80% of your doctor's schedule is going to come from recare, okay? And that 20 to 40% is going to come from new patients. However, patients who are consistently coming through recare over a period of time, they get healthy and they don't need a lot of restorative dentistry. So when that starts to happen, you need a healthy flow of new patients to make sure you've got new dentistry coming in to be diagnosed and completed over time. And so when their recare schedule gets full and they sacrifice new patient volume, now they're going to have periods of time in their schedule where their new patients were low, but continuing care was high, and there's not a lot of dentistry getting scheduled during that period of time. And then they drop the 50 grand on the operatory, and now all of a sudden they're getting all these new patients, and then dentistry picks up again. And they do this over the length of their career. They might do that 4, 5, 6 times. And so you're going to have 4, 5, 6, 4 to 6 week periods, in a 12-month period where just for whatever reason, a phenomenon, the doctor's schedule's slow. It's not a phenomenon, that we created it. And that's where it started. That's my theory anyway.
What have you guys seen as far as, let's take that for example, that they've got an operatory that they're not using? What's holding them back? Why are they not making that a full-time operatory? What are you guys seeing as far as why they wouldn't pull the trigger?
Could be a lot of things. Could be conversion. They got the operatory equipped, ready to use, and they're just not using it.
Yeah, well, like that example, they had 3 ops, but the 4th was just not being used. But it, maybe it was plumbed, maybe it was ready, but they just weren't utilizing it.
If it's not equipped, I would say it's fear. It's the expense. It's like, if I spend this money to equip this, am I going to get my money back? If it is equipped and it's ready to go and we're just not using it, then it could be a conversion. They're not converting dentistry out of hygiene. Could be they don't realize that they're mismanaging their hygiene schedule. Could be a lot of things. Just could just be just lack of patient flow. Yeah, I'd probably need a little bit more information.
So there are several questions that I would ask. When I saw this was sent to me by a client. And when I saw this, my first thing was, okay, number one, the facility is leased. It is not owned. So if the facility is leased and it's only 1,450 square feet, number one, a hygienist seeing 8 patients a day can accommodate 800 to 850 patients on a 4-day work week in 6 months. Okay. Now, how do they define active patient? So they said we have 2,000 active patients or 2,000 active patient charts. How do they define active patient? Just because they're active doesn't mean they're consistently coming through recare. And what those numbers in a 3-op practice, I would say this is a fee-for-service practice. So they're not in network with a bunch of insurance plans. They probably are running 1 room of hygiene, just like Jon said, expecting that 1 room of hygiene to fill the other 2 ops, but the doctor is comfortable seeing that $1 million. He's probably making a good living, not taking the insurance write-offs. And I would think that since they haven't plumbed the 4th, that there's not a whole lot of room for additional expansion. So even if they are referring out ortho, endo, and implant services, there's not a whole lot of room for growth at that facility. So in order to tap what is available, yes, they could tap a little bit by opening up that 4th op, but ultimately that practice is going to have to add about 3 ops to accommodate all of those patients and to bring in those services.
You never know,
they need to be running at least 2 to 3 hygiene rooms and then have 3 other ops for the doctor and a possible associate to be able to accommodate all of the dentistry. But I would say they do have a slight retention problem because one hygienist cannot treat 2,000 patients every 6 months.
There might be a possibility, though, that the building that they're leasing has room for them to grow. If there's, other spaces.
Yeah, it's a possibility, but here's why I think that's doubtful, because the area that this practice is in, real estate is not really available.
Gotcha.
Like the general area, there's no space to purchase.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a fee-for-service practice. Does it say that on the prospectus?
No, but unless they're working 7 days a week
Right. The numbers.
Well, the reason I say that's because their annual on $1 million, 2,000 active patients, their annual patient value is $500, which is, I mean, barely average. So if it was fee for, it could be in there, just fee schedule's really low
or really high. Because again, if they only have one room of hygiene, a hygienist can only accommodate 800 to 850 patients in a 6-month period. Then many of those 2,000 active patients are not coming back through. But if they're fee for service, they could absolutely make those numbers work, but they're not doing implant, ortho, or endo. So all of that is being referred out, which means they're doing $1 million on crowns, fillings, and bridges and dentures.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see, it would be hard for me to see them doing that if they are an in-network provider.
With that amount of space, unless they're working, they'd have to be working, 6 days a week?
What's $2 million? What's $1 million divided by
83,000?
No,
divided by 12?
I know what it is per month. 6,000. What's $1 million? What's $1 million divided by 3? Divided by 3,000.
$1 million divided by 3,000.
Mm-hmm.
333.
333. Yeah, I don't know that that's a fee for service practice.
It may
because
not.
if you take a typical patient, I mean, they maybe it's 60-40, 50-50, but if you take, a typical patient, 2 recare visits per year plus 1 restorative visit per year, that's 6,000 visits on 2,000 active patients. And that would be $333 per visit. So when you compare 333 to national averages, it's kind of falling in that average category, at least on those 2 numbers. So I'd say it may be predominantly fee for service, or I don't know. They just, in my opinion, they should be more productive than that on 2,000 active patients. A lot more productive.
Oh, a lot more on 2,000 active patients. But again, when you look at the 3 ops that they're using, and not the 4th, right? So I know in a 4-op practice, you could do between 1.2 to 1.6, right? In a 4-op practice. If you take one of those ops away and now we're at 3, but you're doing no specialty services, you're doing just bread and butter.
Yeah.
It would seem unlikely, not impossible, but it would seem very unlikely that you're producing that on in-network fees out of 3 operatories. Not impossible, but highly unlikely.
I'd be interested again. That's what's fun about this. Is you can make some inferences and some assumptions about the practice, and then you get the details and kind of see because no 2 practices are the same.
Right.
Now,
what I would say about that practice is that if you could expand and add 2 to 3 ops, if there were the possibility to do that, that is a $2 million practice minimum. If you could add the space to accommodate the patients. Now, the ad didn't say anything about new patient flow. So we don't know if this is an aging practice, right? We don't know anything about that. But you bring those services in-house, and you'd have to have the space to do it. But you bring those services in-house, that could easily be a $2 to $2.3 million operation.
And more if you bring in a specialist to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Or even start doing ortho and implants yourself and just refer out 3rd molar endo, but do endo on every other tooth except, 3rd molars.
That's one of the things we're going to be talking about in the, this is going to be a good event. Talk to Melissa Barrett today with Dentsply Sirona. We've got that virtual event scheduled. We're kind of bouncing. The original date didn't work for Jesse, who's the guy that she's going to have do that event with me. So we're bouncing around a couple of options. But one of the things we're going to do during that event is dispel the myths, like the myths around cone beam. Like I don't want to buy a cone beam because I don't want the liability. I don't, see the value in CERAC because the quality of restorations aren't, it's all that stuff, right? Even though the lab that you're paying to do your crowns or milling your crowns with a CEREC machine. Or a meal, right? Another type of meal. But one of the myths or one of the limiting beliefs that we're going to talk about are bringing services under your roof, and bringing specialists in house. Because I think that one of the things that a lot of doctors are afraid of doing is upsetting the natural order of things. Right? Like specialists do these procedures and I don't want to ruin that relationship or burn that bridge, et cetera. And all that's well and good. I respect that. I appreciate it and understand it. At the same time, there is also something to be said, I think, about the direction, what patients want and the direction the industry's headed. And as a CEO, making sure that you make the right executive decisions to position your practice for longevity, and ensure continuity of employment for your employees and continuity of care for your patients, right? Because it may upset a specialist when you start sending 30% fewer implants to them. But if that specialist is a reasonable person, then I think that they would understand that this individual's doing what's in the best interest of their business. You know what I mean? It's, I don't know. I understand it's a challenging dynamic, but I think if it's my practice, it's my job to find out what my patients want and give them more of what they want. And if their preference is to go to one practice to get implants, ortho, endo, third molars, if they just want one provider, then it's my responsibility to meet the needs of my patients, of my customers.
Well, dentistry's, just like the retail market. When you think about it, I mean, you go to Walmart because you want to be able to buy clothes or Tupperware and food at the same time, whereas people go to Food City or whatever the local grocery store might be in your area, and it's because they want that certain thing and those specialty items. And it's the same thing with dentist's office. You're going to have different people wanting different things. And just like you were saying, dentists have to change in order to adapt to the times and to what's happening and to what their patients want.
Yeah. Jocelyn, how is the East Tennessee market going? Because now you're going down to Athens. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, I'm super excited about all these new places I get to go. It'll be good. It'll give me some exposure and help me to learn a few things, and I'm excited about it.
I know you're busting your butt over there because when you sent the updates to me for Constant Contact to update our database, and it was like 800 contacts, I was like, holy cow. She got a lot of contact information, and we've had some people opt out, and I'm getting our newsletter back up and going. I'm finally getting some of this stuff delegated and off my plate and over to Brittany, which has freed me up I'm fixing to start recording the training sessions on BAM and scheduling to go individual modules for Playbook.
Great. Yes.
I'm able to start recording that stuff. All these virtual events. That was such a great idea. I mean, we got 4 PA requests in 2 events.
Fantastic.
2 virtual events. And just my ignorance, the surveys were anonymous. So I don't know who requested the PAs. So I can't reach out to them. And so I've got to figure out how to do that on future events. But I did send out that email that said your complimentary PA. So I'm hoping the people that attended that event see that email and click. That's what I'm hoping. But yeah, I remember I even when I was looking through Fran Connect the other day, I saw some really old leads from East Tennessee. I was like, man, I haven't talked to that guy in forever. And they were East Tennessee leads, but it was before we owned East Tennessee. And so it was white space at that time. So they're under Memphis, not East Tennessee. And they would be like in one doctor's like on the South Carolina coast. right? I went and did a 1-day workshop with him over there. But there's a handful of those. And I was like, that's interesting, man. That wasn't that long ago. But I'm telling you, man, I beat that market up over there. Ragan can attest to that. I mean, I wore it out.
Right now, I honestly think right now is a great opportunity for Jocelyn and Sam and Ryan, just because coming off of COVID, there are still practices. They got fat and happy right after COVID because everybody was busy, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody was slammed. Everybody was seeing record months. And then we hit October and November. And what happened in October and November? Well, the shutdown was 6 months prior to then. So then the numbers started to fall off, right? And so, but I still think there are a ton of offices out there that are still trying to recover from COVID, where they didn't really need anything right after COVID because schedules were busy and they were full and they were beefy and they were productive. But then they hit that 6-month mark. And I'm sure you guys are doing this, but I'm even preparing my GPs right now for the April and May, depending on which state they're in, for the April and May hygiene lull. Like they need to start preparing. Obviously we're looking at October and November 1st, because April and May this year, it's because it is a cyclical thing, right? If they didn't pre-appoint last March and April or last April and May, and their October, November of 2020 was kind of lull, they saw that same lull in April and May of this year. And if they didn't work on it and they didn't get their schedules beefed back up, they're going to see the same lull this month and in November because of that 6-month cycle. Mm-hmm. So, but I do think that a lot of the docs that we've talked to over the past 5 to 7 years that maybe weren't ready to do anything at that point in time, coming off of COVID and still working on their rebound, and even not even their rebound in production, but their team. Many of them have had huge turnovers in their team.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask about that, if any of you are experiencing or seeing a real war for talent right now. And
yes,
I use that word intentionally because it's aggressive out there.
Yeah. It's nasty, man. I mean, I've got ads in places where, a year ago we'd place the ad and we'd have 30 or 40 applicants. And now we've got the ad running for 60 to 90 days. We got one.
Well, here's something I think we need to prepare for, just as coaches. And that is, what used to be an entry-level pay is not going to cut it anymore.
No, I have front desk people expecting $25 an hour. And you guys, I work in rural Mississippi, rural Arkansas, and Memphis. This ain't Nashville. This is what people are asking to make a move in a rural market. And they're not blinking an eye. I have assistants expecting $25 an hour, expecting that to make a move.
Yeah. And the thing is, and while I hate to say this, but the thing is, it's a reality we're going to have to face. The job market has changed, and $14 an hour for an entry-level position is not going to attract quality talent. And it's going to create a bigger headache for our clients to try to retrain, retool, with all of these new people that know nothing than it is to offer a very competitive wage, something that maybe their counterparts don't want to. We've got to reevaluate BAM as a percentage of revenues, right? Because, I mean, if they can go to Hobby Lobby, Chick-fil-A, or any other place out there and start out at $15 to $16 an hour, we have to compete with that, which means 17 to 18 is entry level. Someone with experience, as you said, Carrie, is going to command 22 to 25. Yeah. And it's just what's taking place.
Well, we're asking.
But with that, and with that, we can also clarify new expectations. So that's going to be kind of the balance, right? The doctors have to be very clear on their expectations on the front end. Like, I'm willing to pay this, and this is what is expected in your role. These are the things that you're going to be accountable for. These are the metrics that I want your position to influence.
Right.
And with those things, they can still contain their BAM within that 20 to 25%, but clarifying those expectations and not getting so anxious to get a butt in the seat, right? Not being so anxious but still sifting for the right people, but they're going to have to offer a very competitive wage to attract the talent.
That's one of the things.
Go ahead, Jocelyn.
That's one of the things that's frustrating to me when I'm talking to a doctor about using us as coaches is that, they'll say, well, I need a couple of people and I want to wait until I get them in place. Whereas if we could get them started with the program and they could do their vision, they could do their values, they could do their agreements, they can lay that out in front of a potential candidate and say, this is what we expect. And this is, and know almost immediately whether or not they're going to be a good fit for their office.
Right. Well, not only that, my response when someone's like, well, I need to fill some spots and I'll reach back out to you. It's like, instead of Forrest Gumping your way through this hiring process, we know what to look for. And
I love that
personality style is going to fit best with your office. We will help you through the interview process, through helping you curate an ad that's going to attract people that are going to be attracted to your brand. We'll help interview them. So you're only having to talk to the cream of the crop and not having to invest your time in going through resumes. I mean, we can help you do that to ensure you find a good fit instead of just hiring a warm body.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it increases the urgency and the pressure on the practice to make sure that they have healthy fee schedule reimbursements. Also increases the pressure to bring services in-house so that they've got more productive, more profitable procedures, because that increase in staff salaries plus inflation with supplies and equipment and everything else is going to attack their bottom line. So to protect their take-home income as the owner and to ensure the financial stability and health of the practice, they're going to have to make some executive decisions there to control that to at least to whatever extent that they can.
Yeah.
I think it just speeds up. It just speeds up the direction things are headed anyway, honestly.
Yeah. And I can tell you, I've got a multi-location that has been a Fortune client for 20 plus years. And 60% of their team is brand new. And so I'm going to see them here in a few weeks, and we've got to start from ground zero. We've got to acclimate these people to the Fortune philosophy. We've got to acclimate them because they still have 40% of their team that is seasoned, that's been through all of the Fortune training, that's been through all of the psychology training and the influence training and the communication training and all of that. But to put the ownership of training these 60% new people on the 40% that are there to get the work done during the day is just a huge undertaking. But again, they, attracting quality. And then you come to a point to where there's an opportunity cost delaying bringing someone in. So one of the other conversations that I know most of us have had to have with our clients is you may end up having to hire someone that is extremely green. But if they have the right attitude, if they have an attitude of willingness, they're teachable, they're coachable, give them the job and then tool them with how to perform in that position. Because that sometimes ends up being much better than hiring someone with 20 years of experience just because they understand your software, but they come with their own stuff and their own limiting beliefs and their own ways of doing things that may or may not match the culture that you've spent so many years building. So green is not always bad. Green is sometimes a blessing, because here's the conversation I had with them. I was like, hiring all of these newbies and losing some people that have been with you for 15, 20 years is not necessarily a bad thing, because new people come with fresh ideas, fresh perspectives, new belief systems. They don't know what they don't know. It's kind of like the bumblebee, right? They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what they can't do. Whereas people who have worked in the same practice for 15 or 20 years, they're very conditioned in these belief systems about what works in their practice and what doesn't, or what their clients want and what they don't.
Why is that like a bumblebee?
Because aerodynamically, the bumblebee is not supposed to be able to fly.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sam, I need to acknowledge you, man. You're the only one on the podcast this evening that hadn't turned their video off.
I I did.
Did you? Then I want to acknowledge myself then.
Thank you. I'll take that.
Where's everybody? What do y'all have? What is there something more important going on in the background?
I have to tell you, the only reason I've tried that mine's gone off is because my internet is unstable.
It's not creating any more work for me. It's creating work for the production company that has to change the overlay every time the number of screens changes.
Yeah, I heard screaming in the background, so I had to make sure my kids weren't killing themselves.
Right.
Or killing each other.
So when they're doing the graphic overlay on this video, I want to let y'all know I did not turn my video off. It's these people. They're creating more work for you.
They should be thanking me when I had to turn my video off. They should be like, thank you. I spared you a horse.
Yeah, and Carrie, you might want to tell Sean that you have a reflective window behind you. So the next time he wants to walk by in the buff, everybody saw.
Trying to put some clothes on.
If you walked by in the buff, that would be something. You know, I mean,
that is hilarious.
I know. It would be like, what? I was
Sam, how's the Nashville market going, man? I hadn't heard a lot from you today.
It's good. No, it's going very well. So I mean, it's definitely still booming as far as just everything in Nashville. I mean, everybody's still moving here. Everybody wants to be here. So yeah, as far as the doctors and new docs and all that kind of stuff, it's going well. It's going really well.
How's your as far as building your book of business over there? What are you running into? What kind of challenges are you running into?
Mostly it's just my prioritization of my time. That's most of it.
Finishing his PA report.
Exactly. That's the majority of it. Just I'm not going to say time management. It's going to be prioritization of my time. That's probably the biggest thing. So, but it's going well. It really is. So it's just finding that time.
But Jocelyn, what obstacles do you run into? Like, in other words, why don't you, and I present this question to Jocelyn and Sam, why don't you have 10 clients right now?
I think that, well, personally, I had to wait a little bit because I'm a very new coach. So I had to wait a little bit to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, because I can't go into an office and just pretend. I have to be me and I have to be real, and I can't say things that aren't just gloss over. And I think our lack of presence here, honestly, I believe that when we get a couple of clients and they start talking about everything that we can do, the referrals are going to start rolling in like crazy. And people are busy and people are shorthanded, and there's always an excuse of one way or another. They, my challenge has been, and Ragan's been helping me with this, but my challenge has been to take whatever it is that, because they're so busy that they don't feel like they have time for anything else. So it's to take whatever it is that's making them busy and show them how we can help them get past that. That's been my challenge.
You know what's interesting? And I apologize, guys. I'm going to have to cut us a little short this evening because I got to go train. I wasn't able to get it in before the podcast. But you know what's interesting is it kind of similar, but one of the things that slowed me down when I got into this business on the front end was just lack of confidence. And because I didn't know it all, I was afraid to be put in a position to where I would need to know the answer to something that I didn't know the answer to. And back then I would talk to people, and you've heard people say, fake it till you make it kind of thing. And back then I would hear that, and I was like, and they would tell me everything that I would tell my former self now. And back then I was like, well, it's easier said than done, right? It's easy to say that, right? It's easy to just figure it out. It's easy to say, just figure it out. It's easy to say, it's confidence. Just be confident, John. Right. And that'll fix the problems. And now being where I'm at now and looking back to then, I would give myself the same advice, because oftentimes when I get asked questions, I don't know the answers, and I just have to figure them out.
Sure.
And it's like, well, wait a second. What? why have I been doing that? I'm supposed to know all the answers, right? And so the reality is you're never going to have all the answers. And the moment that you think you do is the moment you start to go out of business. so it's interesting because I've been challenged with some questions here recently, like insurance billing and accounts receivable and filing insurance claims and errors on claims. And I've been inundated with a bunch of stuff in that area. And that's probably the area that I am the least knowledgeable in. And so it's challenged me to sharpen my saw in that department. And I'm like, this sucks, man. I do not want to learn insurance. And it's like, I don't want to learn this stuff, but it's necessary. So I have the opportunity to learn from some of my clients. And it's like, take me into Open Dental and walk me through how to file an insurance claim.
Nice.
Like I've never done it. I've never needed to know how until somebody asks me how. And then I'm like, I don't know. Right. So it's, you'll never know. And it was my challenge coming up was getting people to call me back. It's like, I didn't have any problem. Like I made the time. I went door to door. I pounded pavement. I did all that stuff, and it was just getting people to respond to me. But what happened was at one point, everybody started to respond at the same time. Right. And it was like, it's almost like you place 1,000 calls or 1,000 visits. Okay. And nothing happens. Oh, another really good comment I need to make. You place I'm glad we're talking about this. You place like 1,000 calls and nothing happens, but then all of a sudden it gets traction. And when it gets traction, I remember bringing on like 5, 6, 7 clients in like 6 months in East Tennessee. And I was like, well, how do I manage this? Then I was just constantly busy. Then I didn't have time. Then it was like, how do I find the time or make the time to continue to follow up? And then I said, well, I don't need to because I have these clients, right? And I'm doing great and all this kind of stuff. Well, then I lost some clients. And because I stopped following up, I didn't have new clients to replace them. So it's an interesting business. This is what I want to bring attention to. You guys may be familiar with this already. I don't know, but this concept came through my mind the other day. How we talk about, it's with your heart that you believe, your mouth that you profess your faith, right? This came to me when I was telling a story about how I came to Fortune. I was talking to Chris Sands in his office. He's a Profi 2020, big CPA firm out of Atlanta. And he was asking me about, how I came into Fortune. And it was when I was sitting, Ragan, in your living room. I was in college and I came home for the weekend. I was sitting in your living room. We were talking about power versus force. And I remember asking you a question. I was like, is this what you do for a living? Because I didn't really know. I knew you worked with dentists and you go to these seminars with suits and ties on and looked all fancy. And I was like, is this what you do for a living? And you were like, what do you mean? And I said, you just travel around and teach people this stuff? Because all the conversations that we used to have back then, and we still have them now, but it was almost like every time we had a conversation that it was one of these conversations. And it's one of those conversations that like feeds your soul. You know what I mean? You're just like, man, I needed that. That is great. Just intellectually stimulating. That was fantastic. And so we were having one of those conversations about this book. And I was so turned on by it. I was like, man, this is such good stuff. This is great. Yeah. And I'm just like, you know what I mean? And I asked her, I said, is this what you do for a living? Just travel around and teach people this stuff? And she said, yeah, more or less. And in that moment, I said, I have to do that. And I said it out loud. I said, I have to do that. Okay. I didn't realize what I had just done until like 10 years later. And 10 years later, I left FedEx. I came over to Fortune. And so my point is this, like, you can say you believe something all day long. You can say you believe it's going to work. You can say you believe in this particular piece of technology, or you believe in this person or whatever. You can say you believe something all day long, but until you take action, you don't. Until you can say it with conviction, you don't. Until there is some step that is taken, that's not real faith. You know what I mean? Because if you had real faith, a real belief system, you would act on it. And so here's the interesting thing. So it's not until you take the action, and when you make the declaration, or you purchase the equipment, or you hire the person, or you enter the relationship, it's not until you take the action do you set in motion the series of events that is ultimately going to manifest the outcome that you say you have faith in or you believe in.
The law of cause and effect.
Yeah. So it's just believing in it's not enough. There has to be behavior. There has to be an action. There has to be a step taken. And when that step is taken, that's when the laws start to work in favor of manifesting that outcome. And I was like, man, that's so good. That's so good.
Now, here's something I want to add to that. And this is for the new coaches, and Carrie will know this to be true. Jon, I know, knows this to be true. And I know this to be true. When, as Jon said, you speak it like it is done, right? When you speak it into existence, I do this all the time. I share these stories with you guys all the time about just speaking it into existence. Well, speaking it hits your reticular activating system. So your RAS begins to notice all of the ways to get it done pop up in your peripherals, right? The other thing that I want to circle back to about what he said was, he said you place 1,000 calls and you may not get a call back for a month or 2 months or 6 months, but every single day you show up and you make the calls anyway. There are two things that have to happen as you make those calls. Two things that keeps your RAS in tune with everything you're trying to create. Two things you have to do, and that is when the first person doesn't call you back, you say out loud to yourself, I'm not even worried. It's going to be the next one. And then you make the next call. I'm not even worried. It's going to be the next one. And then you make the next call and the next one and the next one. And after every one, so that the limiting beliefs don't set in.
Yeah.
So you don't start to groom that limiting psychology that says, maybe I wasn't cut out for this, or this is too hard for me, or I don't know enough. It's like, I'm not even worried. It's going to be the next one. I'm not even worried. It's going to be the next one. So as you're going through this initial phase of mining, I call it mining. We also call it planting season, right? As you're going through planting season, you have to be very, very aware of what you're saying to yourself internally and what belief systems you're building as you do this, because it's very easy for the limiting beliefs to take root and then you'll end up giving up.
Yeah.
The highways are paved with people who gave up.
Yeah. So when you have faith, that was a great quote too, that says there are more dead dreams. You'll find more dead dreams in a graveyard than anywhere else. Yeah. Right. It's because they never took action on them. But that's an interesting point, because like I have faith, I'm willing to take action. And so I take action, and then I take action. And if the result doesn't show up timely enough, then I start letting the seeds of doubt set in and I stop taking action. As soon as I stop taking action, I begin to reverse the process that I've been on. So it's almost like, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. It's kind of like, I can't think of a metaphor or an analogy.
It's kind of like if you plant a garden and you show up every day and water the garden, but your plants aren't blooming yet. And you say, well, they're not blooming, so they're not going to, and you stop watering, you've killed the potential of that plant.
Well, and it also speaks to, like, when you think about the 4 agreements and you think about be impeccable with your word, right? And how powerful word is, and how powerful we are in creating our mindset and that mindset coming to fruition. And that when you speak negatively, you're going to generate negative results. When you speak positively, you will generate that. You have put your word to that, and you have built who you are, not just what you hope to accomplish, not just what you want to get, but who you are to that.
Yeah. And I want to remind everyone, because it's so important in the work that we do, because we are selling the invisible. As coaches, we sell the invisible, right? But the moment we can get the client to feel their ultimate desire as a real possibility, even though they can't see it or touch it yet, when they can believe that it is a real possibility and we can be the catalyst, we are selling the invisible. So what we also have to remember, the work we do, and I was reminded of this, every now and then we get hit with something that we're supposed to be hit with. It is the story of the bamboo. And I love this story because it is such a great metaphor for life in general. And it's such a great metaphor for goal attainment. When that farmer goes to water and fertilize the bamboo every single day for year one and sees nothing happen, he has to have a conversation with himself every single day that he doesn't even see a bud. He's got to have a conversation with himself. Now, because the farmer understands the life cycle of the bamboo, he's not even worried. He's not even worried. So he comes every day, 365 days for year one. And at the end of that year, nothing. So he comes back year two. And every single day he shows up and he waters and he fertilizes and he talks to it and he nurtures it. And at the end of year two, nothing. And then he comes back year three, 365 days, water, fertilize, nothing. Year four, every single day, water, fertilize, and nothing. And then in year five, the bamboo grows something like I forget how many feet, but like it grows, what is it, like 60 feet in 6.5 weeks?
Yeah.
Incredible.
But what it was doing those first 5 years was building a root. And you guys know, if you've ever seen bamboo grow in a yard, it is hard to kill and it is hard to get rid of, because those 5 years that it was spent, it was building roots. It was building this intricate root system that connected it to the earth and to the surrounding plants so that they're very hard to destroy, kind of like kudzu. In the South, we know kudzu. Yep. You can't kill that shit. It just keeps multiplying like rats, right? So if you show up every single day and you follow a formula, you show up every single day and you decide, today I'm going to invest 4 hours and I'm going to mine. Today I'm going to invest 4 hours and I'm going to do the nurturing and the planning and the phone calls. And I'm going to spend my time talking about what it's going to be like 6 months. Now, the good news is we don't have to wait 5 years like the bamboo. We can show up every single day and pour 4 hours in. And within about 90 days, you'll begin to see buds. Mm-hmm. You'll begin to see it start to show up. But again, the psychology part that we have to play with ourselves as new coaches, that's the hardest part. It is the hardest part. It's the hardest part for our clients. It's the last thing that I'll say, because this was a limiting belief for me in the beginning. Because we work with doctors, we work with doctorates, right? I mean, they went to college and then they went to school for 8 more years, to get their degrees and to be able to perform surgeries and do dentistry or do whatever. And they are just people. They are just people like you and me. They have the 6 human needs, the exact same 6 human needs. If you cut them, they bleed the exact same. They go through the same trials and tribulations in their personal life as they do in their business life. They're just people. They're people in need of help, and we're the ones that can give it to them. And if you own that as a calling, and I do believe that being a coach is a calling. It is not a job. It is a calling. Yep. Because you have to love your clients so much, and you have to you have to see their dreams before they do. Before they can even articulate them, you have to be able to see them. And a calling isn't always profitable in the beginning, but that's why it's a calling. And so when we show up and they see our commitment to them and we ask the hard questions and we take the deep dives and we do the same work with us on our lives and sculpting and designing our own lives, then you begin to see they're just people. They have the same dreams as every person walking across the street. And if you passed a doctor in a convenience store, you would not know who they were unless they were wearing scrubs. You wouldn't know to be intimidated by them. True?
True.
If you saw them at Target or Nordstrom, you wouldn't know to be intimidated by them. You wouldn't know to be intimidated by that title. And it's just a title. It's just a word. That's it. But they are just people with the same needs, the same 6 human needs, the same desires, the same 6 areas of life mastery, the same issues with managing their state, managing their psychology, developing really powerful language. And that's everything that we do. So if you've ever been intimidated by that 2-letter word, doctor, well, I guess it's not a 2, but a 2-letter abbreviated word.
Gotcha.
Just remember, they're just people. It's like talking to a friend. That's it. Talking to one human being to another. That's why Power versus Force is so powerful. And if you haven't gotten that book, what are you waiting for?
Man, what are you playing with?
What?
What are you throwing around? Tennis ball?
I gotta keep my hands occupied, otherwise it's so I gotta
What do I do with I don't know what to do with my hands.
Have you guys seen? I walked into a store the other day and I pick up this thing that looks like a one of those, a stress ball, and I squeeze it and all this like stuff comes out of the ball. It was the weirdest thing. It's like this goo that comes out, but it goes back in.
Yes.
I had a really good time with it.
My kids
I'm not gonna lie, I enjoyed it a lot.
It's like I loved it.
One of those, Sam. It's so fun.
I love it.
I love it.
It's like, what did Mom say when she saw that house? She drove by. She goes, "I don't like it. I like it." Guys, I hate to run. I got to get to the gym, but great chat tonight. Appreciate y'all taking the time. We'll do this again here in a couple of weeks.
Sounds awesome. And I noticed Carrie moved her background. Were you worried?
Right.
I was.
Move away from reflective surfaces.
That'd be great. Now that would be a great story. Remember that time on the podcast?
Yes.
We can watch.
I could have the production company like splice out that one particular portion. We can make a meme out of it and put it on Instagram.
There you go.
Why to avoid reflective surfaces?
Just have them frost that glass. Yeah.
Right. All right, guys. Well, thanks so much for tuning in tonight. Great call. We'll do it here in just a couple of weeks.
All right. It's great to see you again.
Bye, guys.
Right. Have a good evening. Love you guys.